Okay, we're looking at Shadow of the Eagle. Battle of Medellin, 1809. I am going to I'm going to be getting into some Spanish shock combat here, but I will probably do a bunch of execution and come back and talk about what did or did not happen. So just commentary on the French shock combat phase. So first, the Spanish cavalry here. Remember, Spanish cavalry in this battle are all light cavalry. They were here. I started adding up the melee to get the odds here against the French cavalry, which is here, which was here. I easily got 3-1, but then I was thinking, well, what about the infantry here? I was going to do 2 attacks, but clearly a unit may not be attacked more than once per turn, and I didn't see any prohibition against infantry attacking with cavalry. I didn't see that. So I went ahead and combined it, so several things are interesting. First of all, we went over 5-1. Attacks at 5-1, attacks at greater than 5-1 odds are executed as 5-1 attacks. And interestingly, basically, even at the 5-1 column using just the 1-6 die roll spread, not the 7 or 8 or more you get from DRMs, even the 1-6, the attacker could still get a loss, and the defender getting outright a loss is only 1-6 result. Otherwise you're pushing the defender back. So they rolled very average. They pushed the French cavalry back. They were disordered. Well, they had to retreat, and then they had to take a morale check. And they wound up disordered. And then I can advance. That made me wonder, because I was in this position of advancing after combat. Then I was wondering, well, can infantry and cavalry occupy the same hex? Of course, I'm coming from a recent game where that would not be allowed, and I guess there are a fair number of games like that would not allow that. But I checked the stacking rules. I don't see any prohibition against that. And when you think of 250 meter, after I thought of 250 meter hexes, then I was like, oh, okay. Then I was thinking, it's understandable that you could stack them. I don't know if the design gives you an incentive to do that or a disincentive to do that. I don't know that yet. But I decided to keep them separate for now. But one thing I can tell you is you're going to get some monster stacks here, because there isn't anything 20. I don't think there's anything prohibiting that. And you add a couple of loss markers in there. Let's just throw a couple of loss markers on top there. You're getting some major stacks going on. So that'll be interesting. One thing I noticed, which is kind of important, not only is there a hard limit of 18 strength points attacking in shock combat per across a single hex side, there's also a hard limit of 24 combat points. Oh wow. Oh, there we go again. That is a major difference. I'm running across numerous major differences. So back to my magazine English translation, says a maximum of 24 points may defend in a single hex. That's fairly significant. But then the later online translation, which is quite different now, I'm learning, It has a maximum of 24 combat points, may attack or defend in a single hex. That also means something specific, significant, and quite different from... anyways, I'm starting to default to... Actually, I'm defaulting to the Spanish if I can possibly translate it. Because, by the way, I think I found an important peculiarity in the Spanish player aid card that is not in any of the English translations. So, okay, I'll get to that later, I think. But I'm going to default to first the Spanish if I can at all translate it myself, and then next the English translation that came with this game, Medellin 1809. Okay, so there's that, and then I don't think there was anything. No, there was here. When this Spanish infantry tried to shock combat the French cavalry there, they just retreated before combat, which is just a single hex back, no issue, no morale check, nothing. I'm actually kind of surprised that it didn't. I'm surprised that I'm not required to do a morale check, because I would think that very low morale units might... Well, you could say low morale units would be even more likely to retreat before combat, but yeah, I don't see anything prohibiting that. So they just pulled back, which again, this emphasizes the idea that I think there's going to be a lot of moving around. Oh, there's another thing. You see, this is the problem. I knew I was going to have this problem. The yellow, the orangish yellow Spanish units on the orangish yellow map I thought was going to cause problems, and it did, because I almost forgot this guy. So this guy, this is important. This is Spanish cavalry, and they wanted to charge the French cavalry there, and for the charging, which would have doubled their strength, they had to make a morale check. And they rolled horribly. I think they rolled a 1 on the morale table, which was a rout. And it clearly says here with cavalry charges, a rout result does apply to the charging morale check. So I took that to mean they were here, they wanted to charge, they failed the morale check horribly. Granted, it was a really bad result, but they were, well, I was about to say they were seriously repulsed. I guess oh, I know why that might be fairly... We'll see how easily they rout off the map and are eliminated because of that. If that happens really easily, then I might have an issue with that. But just being repulsed about 500 meters, half a click, half a kilometer, I'm not sure I have a major issue with that. Moving to the center of the line. In the center, I think they also rolled a 1, actually. So this cavalry here in the center, they tried to charge the infantry there, which would have been, that would have been a nice combat if they had succeeded. But they also failed miserably, and they were also routed. So, let me double check the morale table. Certainly early on. No, there are two things that are suggested here, and I'm going to emphasize suggested, because maybe this will turn out to not actually be the case. But what's suggested here is that if you have D morale, see, here's D morale on the top right there. If you have D morale cavalry or worse, and you can have E or F, I guess by the table, I haven't actually seen any F morale in this game yet, but if you have D or worse morale cavalry, I'm not sure you should. Now I'm realizing maybe you should not be charging with them at all. Just use them to conduct normal combat. Now, the other thing is that, again, what's suggested here is that if you're subtracting 1 for every strength point loss for that morale check, even to charge, and why would that be? Well, I guess there are two ways of looking at that, but the other thing suggested is that you might as well just charge with cavalry that have C or better morale and charge early in the battle before they start taking a couple losses. Because, well, yeah, if a B morale unit has a 1 in 6 chance, again, ignoring DRMs, a B morale unit. So a B morale unit has a 1 in 6 chance of its cavalry charge being, whatever you want to call it, nullified, of it not following through. Because if it gets a D result, it's not disorganized, but it also does not shock combat. A disorganized result has no effect except that the unit may not participate in shock combat that phase. So it kind of is a you'll stay there, but you basically gave up the attack or whatever, however you want to look at that. But that B morale unit, which is pretty good, I mean, it takes 2 losses. It is effectively a D. It is now effectively a D morale unit, and you have all the problems associated with that. Now to the right. So on the far right, we had something similar. We had the Spanish infantry there. Spanish infantry wanted to shock combat the French cavalry there, but the French cavalry just pulled back, which again is, at this level, at this scale and scope, and according to this design, there's going to be a fair amount of movement. So cavalry, I think in many cases, is just going to pull back from infantry, which means, of course, like on the Spanish left, I think the Spanish need to send their cavalry in to counter the French cavalry. But then we're going to have, I don't know to what extent it matters, but I don't know if it matters, but if the average French cavalry morale is C, and I'm looking right across the battle line here, French cavalry morale C, 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 B, C, C. So let's see back. Well, actually, I guess it's mostly infantry that's back here. Yeah, it's basically cavalry. It's basically a cavalry front line and infantry coming up next turn. So if the average French cavalry is C and the average Spanish cavalry is, we have E, we have D, D, yeah. So if the average Spanish cavalry is D, but the average French morale for cavalry is C, and I'm looking at a bunch of medium French cavalry against all Spanish light cavalry, I guess that's going to make a difference. Yeah, actually eyeballing here, while the Spanish have cavalry on the flanks here, it's mainly our infantry and artillery all through the center here. So they are trying to go up against mainly French, not mainly, but half French cavalry here. that French cavalry is just going to pull back. Which the battle did come back to this area here historically. So we'll see.